America's gun ownership rate used to be a lot higher than it is today, yet deadly school shootings are mostly a recent phenomenon. What has changed? Could it be our overall culture has undergone a toxic shift?
Hey, my name's Andrew Larcy, and this is my argument against the claim that violent video games can cause mass shootings. On February 14, 2018, there was a mass shooting in Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, which resulted in 17 dead and 17 more injured. There was a meeting in which to try and find a way to make mass shootings happen less often. Some people even brought up the fact that it could be violent games and or violent media.
Talk about the desensitization to killing, and I firmly believe that that's a root cause. I look to my own life. I was desensitized to killing on the battlefield, and I know how not glorious that is. It's not, but that's not what people get out of seeing a John Wick movie. That's not what people get out of playing Call of Duty.
I'm hearing more and more people say the level of violence on video games is really shaping young people's thoughts.
Something culturally has changed, and I would submit that we have become significantly desensitized to death and to violence.
The argument being made here is violent video games cause mass shootings. So, first we should look at the legal side of things. So in 1993, there were Senators Joseph Lieberman and Herbert Kohl who expressed concern for the issue. This resulted in the ESRB, or the Video Game Rating System, being formed. Basically, this argument is all psychological. The main idea is that a piece of violent media will cause a person to become more violent, which will result in them committing a violent crime as a result. So, if that's true, it means that it shouldn't matter where the video game is being played per se, and since these games are being played worldwide, it tells us that there should be a pattern of gun violence across the globe. Let's take Japan for example. Japan spends the most on video games per person, clocking in at around $120 per person. But in 2014, there were just 6 gun deaths there, or 0.0047 deaths per 100,000 people. Compare this to the US, where in the same year, an average of $74 per person was spent on video games, yet 33,599 gun deaths occurred, or 10.5 gun deaths per 100,000 people. If video games desensitize people to violence and cause mass shootings, then why are there far fewer gun deaths in Japan, a country that spends so much more on video games than in America? Also, we should find that the most dangerous places, the places with the most gun deaths, should have the most sales on video games. Honduras has the most gun deaths per 100,000 people of any country, with around 60, but they've outright banned violent video games as a whole. The same goes for the country with the second highest rate of gun deaths per 100,000 people, Venezuela, with 59.3 gun deaths per 100,000 people. Matter of fact, possession of violent video games in Venezuela results in a fine and 3 to 5 years in prison. First thing to discuss is violent video games do not increase violence. This 2005 study of 213 people involved the experimental group playing a violent MMORPG, or massively multiplayer online role-playing game. The finding of the study, quote, do not support the assertion that violent game will cause substantial increases in real-world aggression. Another study in 2012 consists of 6,567 8th graders. It found that when you control for other factors, violent video games show no negative effects in males and fewer and weaker effects in females. This 3-year study of 165 kids found that violent video games did not have any negative outcomes, and that bigger contributors are usually outside factors such as, quote, depression, antisocial personality traits, exposure to family violence, and peer influences. This is Patrick Markey, who has a PhD in psychology and is professor of psychology in Villanova, saying so.
We know that violent video games are linked to increases in hostility and so forth, but there's really no evidence to suggest that such violent media is linked to these shootings or really any real-world violence. That what we find in our laboratory studies are very small effects affecting our thoughts, our cognitions, but not so much affecting our actual real behaviors.
Next, video games do not decrease pro-social behavior. This is a 2013 study which measures how helpful participants would be in picking up spilled pens after playing either a violent or non-violent video game. It concluded, quote, we failed to find evidence that playing video games affects pro-social behavior. And finally, third, if for some reason the evidence presented isn't adequate, here's 10 more studies that show that violent video games cause no harmful effects. Before we end, this is Dave Grossman. He is a retired United States Army Lieutenant Colonel and a massive anti-video game advocate. Also the author of Assassination Generation, Video Games, Aggression, and the Psychology of Killing. On February 19, 2018, he went on Tucker Carlson Tonight.
What is the social science on it? What is the evidence?
The AMA, the APA, the American Academy of Pediatrics, Surgeon General after Surgeon General have made definitive statements.
What Lieutenant Grossman means by this is they have all come out and said video games cause violence. This is a statement from the American Psychological Association that has the headline, APA Review confirms the link between playing violent video games and aggression. This appears to support his argument until you read the very next line. Finds insufficient research to link video game play to criminal violence, which means the organization he cited disagrees with his argument. Also, on November 22nd, 2016, Lieutenant Colonel Grossman went on a Fox News show called Health Talk and discussed the same argument.
And when I began to become aware of how we teach soldiers in cop skill, how we have to condition them to be able to pull the trigger, to overcome the resistance, we realized that video games doing the same things to the kids.
Co-chair of psychology at Stetson University, Christopher Ferguson, interviewed a military psychologist about if video games help with military training and learned, quote, "The military wants professional soldiers who think and solve problems rationally, not vigilantes who go around shooting wildly at everything that moves." He noted that the military does use video game simulators, although these aren't typically games like Doom, for such skills as decision-making and team performance, but not for desensitization to violence. So why is it that violent video games do not cause violent behavior? Violent video games trigger a fight or flight response since their active competitive nature causes your brain to release adrenaline. Because you don't flight, which that would make for a very boring game, you go into fight mode, becoming temporarily more aggressive. But the aggression you are experiencing does not come from the game, but rather the competitive side of the game. This is a study from Brock University in Canada. It finds that the competitive aspect of video games and not the violent aspect is what triggers this fight or flight response. And that is why violent video games do not cause mass shootings. Thank you for watching.